If you ever work night shift at a hospital, pay attention to which floors go quiet too early. I wish someone had told me that before October 7th, 2023. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm a registered nurse. I deal in vitals, medications, and evidence-based care. What I'm about to tell you shouldn't be possible, but I still have the transfer papers to prove I left Mass General's third floor after only 6 weeks. I started on 3 West in late August. It's a general medical floor, nothing special. Post-surgical patients, pneumonia cases, the occasional overdose getting monitored. The kind of floor where you expect beeping monitors and call lights, not silence. But 3 West got quiet. Too quiet. The first night I noticed it was a Tuesday. I came in for my 7 p.m. shift, got report from the day nurse. Standard stuff. 32 beds, 18 patients, most of them stable. By 9 p.m., the floor should still have some activity, family members leaving, patients calling for pain meds, the usual shuffle of hospital life. Instead, nothing. I remember standing at the nurse's station, listening. The fluorescent lights hummed above me, that constant electrical buzz you stop noticing after a while. But underneath it, underneath that hum, there should have been something else. Anything else. Room 321's call light went on. I grabbed my badge scanner and headed down the hallway. The linoleum reflected the overhead lights in long streaks, and my sneakers made these small squeaking sounds with each step. Squeak, squeak, squeak. That's when I realized I could hear my own footsteps too clearly. Room 321 held Mr. Patterson, a 72-year-old recovering from a bowel resection. Sweet guy. Retired history teacher. He'd been asking me about my family all week, telling me stories about teaching at Boston Latin in the 70s. I pushed open his door. Empty, the bed was made. Fresh sheets. The whiteboard on the wall still had my name under RN and his diet order, clear liquids. But Mr. Patterson was gone. His call light was still on. I checked the bathroom. Nothing. I checked the hallway. Nobody. I went back to the nurse's station and pulled up his chart on the computer. Discharged at 6:45 p.m. But I'd gotten there at 6:50. The day shift nurse, Marcus, hadn't mentioned any discharges during report, and even if Mr. Patterson had gone home, why would his call light be on? I should have left then, obviously. But then I found the second empty room. 319, 317, 315. All discharged, according to the computer. All within the same 15-minute window. All with their call lights on. By 9:30, I'd walked the entire floor twice. 18 patients had somehow become 7. The computer said discharges. The bed said something else. Because every single empty room had one thing in common. The privacy curtains were pulled shut. You know that feeling when you're alone in a parking garage? That prickle on the back of your neck? That certainty that something's watching you even though you can't see anything? I had that feeling standing in the hallway of 3 West, looking at room after room with their curtains drawn tight around empty beds. I called down to the emergency department, asked if they'd sent any patients to 3 West that evening. 3 West? The charge nurse sounded confused. Hold on. No, nothing to 3 West tonight. We've been slammed, but everything's going to 4 and 5. Why? Just checking on a possible admission, I said. You guys must be slow up there. Yeah, I said, slow. I hung up and stared at my patient assignment sheet. 18 names, 7 patients actually in their rooms, and 11 rooms with closed curtains. The thing is, hospitals don't pull curtains when a room is empty. There's no point. The curtains stay open, so housekeeping can see the room needs to be cleaned, so the next admission can be spotted quickly. Closed curtains mean occupied beds. Closed curtains mean privacy. I walked back to 321, stood in the doorway. The curtain was drawn in a perfect arc around the bed, the fabric absolutely still, not even moving from the air circulation. I reached out and pulled the curtain back. Empty bed, fresh sheets. But the pillow had an indentation, like someone's head had been resting there recently. I backed out of the room and heard it. A call light, ding, not the electronic chime from the hallway panel. This was the old sound, the mechanical ding from inside the room. Mass General had upgraded to electronic call lights 5 years ago, but I'd heard stories from older nurses about the old system, the kind where patients pulled a cord and an actual bell rang at the nurse's station. Ding, 317. I walked to the doorway. The curtain was closed. I could see the outline of the bed through the thin fabric, the shape of the mattress, the angle of the bed rails, and I could see a shadow. Someone was in that bed. My heart was doing this thing where it wasn't exactly racing. It was just beating too hard. Like each pulse was trying to crack my ribs from the inside. I'm a nurse. I've seen people die. I've done chest compressions on children. I don't scare easy. But I did not want to open that curtain. I did it anyway. Empty bed, fresh sheets, pillow with an indentation, and on the bedside table, a cup of water, half empty. The condensation on the outside of the cup was fresh. I touched it. Cold. Wet. Someone had been drinking from this cup within the last few minutes. I checked the computer again. 317, Mrs. Eleanor Vance, discharged at 6:45 p.m. I navigated to her discharge summary. Discharged to home with family. Condition at discharge, stable. I scrolled down to the nursing notes. Marcus had written the discharge note at 6:43 p.m., 2 minutes before the official discharge time. Patient ambulating independently, belongings gathered, daughter present for transport, patient expressed gratitude for care, departed via wheelchair to main entrance. Standard discharge note. Nothing weird, except Marcus had also written this in a separate note time-stamped at 6:38 p.m. Patient increasingly confused, asking repeatedly about the man in the hallway, reoriented to place and time, no behavioral concerns. Daughter states this is normal for evening hours. The man in the hallway. I looked up from the computer and realized I was the only person at the nurse's station. My charge nurse, Kim, had gone on break. The nursing assistant, Jordan, was in with one of the actual patients. The unit clerk had gone home at 7. I was alone on a floor designed for 32 patients and 6 staff members. The hallway stretched in both directions from the nurse's station, a long corridor of linoleum and fluorescent lights and closed doors. At the far end, maybe 60 feet away, the hallway made a 90-degree turn toward the patient bathrooms in the medication room. Something moved at that corner, just for a second. A shadow shifting along the wall, like someone had walked past just out of sight. Hello? My voice sounded strange, too loud. Jordan, is that you? No response. I walked toward the corner. My sneakers squeaked with each step, and I found myself counting them. 1, 2, 3, 4. At 10 steps, I stopped, because I could hear footsteps that weren't mine, coming from around the corner. Squeak. 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 The same rhythm as mine, the same sound. I backed up 1 step. The other footsteps backed up 2. This is ridiculous, I said out loud, talking to myself, trying to sound rational. I'm freaking myself out over nothing. I walked forward quickly, rounding the corner in 2 long strides. The hallway was empty, but the door to the medication room was open. I never left that door open. Nobody did. It's a secure room, locked, requires badge access. And I knew. I absolutely knew. I had locked it after pulling meds at 8:30. The medication room is small, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet. Shelves of medications line 3 walls, and there's a computer terminal for verifying orders. 1 way in, 1 way out. I stood in the doorway and looked inside. The computer was on. I hadn't left it on. The screen showed a patient chart. I leaned in to see whose file was open. Eleanor Vance, 317. The screen was on her nursing notes, scrolled to the bottom, to a note I hadn't seen before. It was time-stamped at 9:43 p.m., 12 minutes ago. Patient returned to 3 West, confused and disoriented, states she couldn't find the exit, found in stairwell, returned to room 317, family notified. But Eleanor Vance had been discharged at 6:45. I clicked on the note to see who had written it. The author field said S. Chen R.N. My name. I hadn't written this note. I backed out of the medication room and heard the ding again. 3:17, then 3:15, then 3:19. All the empty rooms calling at once. I ran to the nurse's station and grabbed my phone, called Kim. Hey, I need you back here right now. What's wrong? She sounded concerned. Kim was good people, 20 years on night shift, unflappable. Just, please come back. She was there in 2 minutes, found me standing at the nurse's station, staring at the hallway. Sarah, what's going on? How many patients do we have tonight? She gave me a weird look. 7. Why? And how many rooms have their curtains closed? What? Just check with me, please. We walked the floor together. 7 occupied rooms, curtains open, patients sleeping peacefully or watching TV, and 11 empty rooms. Every single curtain was open. Sarah, are you feeling okay? Kim asked. I didn't know how to answer that because I could see the indentations in the pillows, the half-empty water cups, the call lights that had been ringing. But Kim couldn't. I'm fine, I lied. Just a long shift. Kim went back to her break. I sat at the nurse's station and pulled up Eleanor Vance's chart one more time. The note about her returning to the floor was gone. Like it had never existed. I need you to understand something before I continue. I'm not someone who believes in ghosts. I believe in science, in things I can measure and document. But that night I documented things that later disappeared from the medical record. At 11 p.m., I was checking vitals in room 309 when I heard the medroom door close. I hadn't opened it. I walked back to check. The door was locked. I used my badge to open it. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, except the computer was on again. Different chart this time. Thomas Holloway. Room 323. I recognized the name. Thomas Holloway had been a patient on 3 West 3 months ago. I'd taken care of him once during orientation, 68 years old, pancreatic cancer, metastatic. He died on the floor, natural death. Expected. Peaceful. His daughter had been with him. The computer was showing his death note, written by the night nurse who'd been there. The note was clinical, professional. Time of death, 1:17 a.m., family notified, body care completed, transported to morgue at 2:30 a.m. But underneath the death note was something new, another note, time stamped at 11:03 p.m. at tonight. Patient found standing in hallway outside room 323, disoriented and trying to locate his daughter. Patient states he cannot find the exit, assisted back to bed, patient resting comfortably. Author, S. Chen, R.N. I had not written this note. I clicked out of the chart and the screen went black. Not sleep mode black, completely black. No light, no power. Then it turned back on. And there was a new chart open. Michael Reeves, room 315, Patricia Santos, room 319, Eleanor Vance, room 317, Thomas Holloway, room 323, James Chen, room 311. The names scrolled past on the screen, faster and faster, dozens of them, all with the same new note. Patient found in hallway, cannot locate exit, return to room, resting comfortably. And every single one, every single patient whose chart appeared on that screen had died on 3 West. Not in the last month, in the last 10 years. I closed the medication room door and locked it. Then I heard all the call lights go off at once, every empty room on the floor, dinging in perfect unison. I stood in the hallway and counted them. 11 call lights, 11 rooms, all the rooms where patients had died. And through the closed doors, I could hear something, movement, rustling, like fabric being pulled aside, like curtains being opened. I walked to 321 and looked through the window in the door. The curtain was open, and in the bed, underneath fresh white sheets, there was a shape, the shape of a person. I watched as the shape sat up slowly. The sheets fell away, and I could almost see, but it was like trying to focus on something through water. The figure was there but not there, present but not solid. The figure turned toward the door, toward me, and I recognized the face. Mr. Patterson. Not the Mr. Patterson who'd been discharged 12 hours ago. A different Mr. Patterson, older, grayer. The Mr. Patterson who died on 3 West 6 years ago from septic shock after his bowel resection had complications. I'd read about his death during orientation. It was one of the cases they used to teach about recognizing sepsis early. He looked at me through the door, and his mouth moved. I couldn't hear him through the glass, but I could read his lips. I can't find the exit. I ran, not walking quickly, not trying to stay professional. I ran to the nurse's station and called Kim. I need you to trade assignments with me, right now. I can't work this floor tonight. To her credit, Kim didn't argue. She heard something in my voice and just said, "Okay, go to 4 West. I'll cover here." I took the stairs to the 4th floor. Didn't wait for the elevator. Just ran up one flight and pushed through the door to 4 West like I was escaping a fire. The 4th floor was normal, busy, alive. Call lights going off for real reasons. Patients awake and talking. The night shift clerk was on the phone. A family member was in the hallway arguing about visiting hours. It was beautiful. I worked the rest of my shift on 4 West. At 6 a.m., I went back to 3 West to get my things. Kim was at the nurse's station finishing up her charting. "How was your night?" I asked. She looked up at me, and for just a second, just a fraction of a second, I saw something in her eyes. "Quiet," she said. "Really quiet." I transferred to the emergency department 2 weeks later. I told my manager I wanted more variety, more acute cases, more action. That was partly true, but mostly I just couldn't work on a floor where the patients who left sometimes came back, and they all had the same problem. They couldn't find the exit. There's an unwritten rule about the basement of Massachusetts General Hospital. Everyone who's worked there more than a month knows it. I learned why the hard way. My name is David Torres, and I've been a facilities maintenance engineer at Mass General for 3 years. I fix what breaks. I keep the building running. It's a good job. Union, decent pay, overtime when I want it. The kind of job where you learn the building inside and out. And Mass General is old. The main building dates back to 1821. 200 years of additions, renovations, tunnels, and forgotten spaces. The basement is a maze of corridors connecting the old sections to the new ones, running underneath Fruit Street and Cambridge Street, linking buildings that look separate above ground. We've got the rule about the basement for a reason. Never go into the sub-basement alone after midnight. The sub-basement is different from the regular basement. The regular basement has the kitchen, the loading docks, central supply. Normal stuff, well lit, busy even at night. The sub-basement is older. It's where the original hospital foundation is. The tunnels down there connect to the old psychiatric wing, the morgue from the 1800s, the original surgical theaters. Most of it is abandoned now, just storage and mechanical systems, boilers, HVAC, electrical panels, the kind of place where you go when something breaks and you need to fix it fast. I broke the rule on November 12, 2023. My radio crackled at 11:45 p.m. I was in the break room, halfway through a sandwich and watching the Bruins game on my phone. "Dave, we've got a chiller alarm in sub-basement section C. Temp spike in the east wing. Need you to check it out." Section C, the old section. "Can it wait until morning?" I asked. "Negative? More temps are climbing? If that chiller goes down, we're canceling surgeries tomorrow." Damn. I grabbed my toolkit and headed for the service elevator. The kind of elevator the public never sees. The freight elevator that goes all the way down, below the basement, below the morgue level, down to the sub-basement where the old hospital lives. The doors opened at 11:52 p.m., 8 minutes until midnight. I could make it. Quick fix. Check the chiller. Reset the alarm. Back upstairs by 12:15. Easy. The sub-basement has this smell. It's not bad exactly. Just old. Like concrete and steam and something else I could never quite place. The hallway stretched ahead of me, lit by caged bulbs every 20 feet. The ceiling was low, maybe 7 feet, and the walls were the original brick from the 1800s. My footsteps echoed as I walked. Section C was at the far end of the sub-basement, past the old morgue, past the abandoned surgical prep rooms, past the section where they used to keep the tuberculosis patients before they built the sanatorium on the south side. I'd been down here plenty of times, always with another engineer, always before midnight, but never alone. The chiller room was locked with a padlock, old school security. I had the key on my ring. The lock was stiff, and I had to jiggle it for a minute before it clicked open. The chiller was running, but the temp gauge was reading high. Not critical yet, but getting there. I checked the coolant levels, inspected the compressor, looked for leaks. Nothing obvious. I reset the alarm and watched the temperature stabilize. Problem solved. I was locking the door when I heard it. Footsteps, not mine. Someone else was in the sub-basement. "Hello," I called. "Maintenance, who's down here?" No answer. The footsteps continued, steady, rhythmic, coming from deeper in the sub-basement, from Section D. Nobody goes to Section D. Section D is where the old psychiatric wing connected to the main hospital. It's been sealed off since the 60s when they moved psych to a newer building. The doors are locked, the tunnels are supposed to be closed, and there's no reason for anyone to be back there. But I could hear the footsteps clearly, walking away from me, going deeper into Section D. I should have left. I should have radioed up to security and let them handle it. But here's the thing about working maintenance in a big hospital. You get curious. You start to wonder about all the spaces you've never seen, all the rooms that are locked, all the tunnels that supposedly don't go anywhere. I followed the footsteps. The door to Section D was chain-locked. The chain was old and rusty, and the lock looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. But the door itself was open about 6 inches, just enough for someone to slip through. The footsteps had stopped. I pulled the door open wider and shined my flashlight into Section D. The tunnel was different from the others, older. The walls weren't brick, they were stone, hand-cut blocks that looked like something from a medieval castle. The ceiling was arched, maybe 8 feet at the highest point, and the floor was uneven. My flashlight beam only reached about 30 feet. After that, darkness. "This is maintenance," I called. "If you're back here, you need to identify yourself." Nothing. I stepped into the tunnel. The door swung shut behind me with a heavy metallic clang. I spun around and grabbed the handle, pushed. The door was locked from the outside. "Hey! Hey!" I pounded on the door. "I'm locked in! Someone let me out!" No response. I tried my radio. "This is Torres in sub-basement Section D. I'm locked in the old tunnel. Need someone to open the door from the outside." Static. I checked my phone. No signal. Of course not. We're underground, beneath stone walls that are probably 3 feet thick. I was alone in Section D. I turned back to the tunnel and raised my flashlight. The beam caught something on the wall about 10 feet away. Letters, painted in what looked like white paint, but old and fading. Treatment Ward B. Underneath, in smaller letters, Capacity 40. I knew what this was, the old psychiatric wing. Back when treatment meant isolation, when mental illness was something you hid away in the basement where no one could see it. Before medications, before therapy, before anyone understood what they were dealing with. This was where they kept the patients they couldn't help, the ones who screamed. I walked forward. The tunnel sloped downward, taking me deeper underground. My flashlight beam bounced off the stone walls, and I could see more markings, numbers painted on doors. Most of the doors were closed, but a few hung open on broken hinges. I looked into one of the rooms. It was small, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet. No windows, no furniture. Just 4 stone walls and a drain in the middle of the floor. The drain was the color of rust. On the far wall, someone had scratched words into the stone. "Let me out, let me out, let me out," over and over, hundreds of times, carved so deep the letters had gouged into the rock. I backed out of the room and kept walking. The tunnel branched, left or right. I chose left because the air seemed to be moving that direction. Moving air meant ventilation. Ventilation meant a way out. The temperature was dropping. My breath started to fog. That didn't make sense. The sub-basement was always warm from the boilers and the steam pipes. But here it felt like a freezer. I heard the footsteps again. Behind me this time. I turned around fast. Nothing. Just the tunnel stretching back the way I'd come. But I could see something in the darkness beyond my flashlight beam. A shadow, moving. Hello? My voice cracked. This isn't funny. I need to get out of here. The shadow moved closer. I could make out a shape now. A person. Walking toward me with slow, deliberate steps. I raised my flashlight and aimed it directly at the figure. The beam went through them, not around them, through them, like shining a light through smoke. But I could still see them. A woman, middle-aged, wearing what looked like a hospital gown from decades ago, the kind they don't use anymore. Her hair was long and tangled, and her feet were bare. She stopped about 15 feet away from me, and she spoke. "Are you here to let me out?" Her voice was quiet, hopeful. I'm maintenance," I said. "I got locked in by accident." She tilted her head. "Locked in?" "Yes, I remember being locked in." "Do you know how to get out of here?" She smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. "Nobody gets out. Not anymore. The exits are all closed." "There has to be a way out," I said. "I came in through Section C. The door's locked now, but there has to be another way." "Section C," she repeated. "Is that what they call it now? We just called it the tunnel to treatment." "What treatment?" She looked at me like I'd asked a stupid question. "The treatment for being bad, for being sick, for being wrong." She gestured at herself. "For being whatever they decided I was." When were you here?" 1962. At least, that's when I came down to the basement. I don't know how long I was here. They didn't tell us. They didn't tell us anything except to be quiet and take our medicine and stop making trouble. 1962. 60 years ago? "I'm sorry," I said, "but I need to find a way out." "So do I," she said softly. "I've been looking for 60 years. She walked past me, through me. I felt a cold spike drive through my chest, and for a second I couldn't breathe, like being plunged into ice water. When I could breathe again, she was gone. But I could hear more footsteps now, coming from ahead, from behind, from the side tunnels. Dozens of footsteps. I ran, didn't care which direction, just picked a tunnel and sprinted. My toolkit banged against my hip, my flashlight beam jerking wildly across the walls. I passed more rooms, more numbers painted on doors, more drains in the floor, and in every room, shadows, standing, sitting, lying on the floor. Some of them turned to watch me run past. Some of them didn't move at all, but they were there. All of them. The tunnel opened into a larger space, a chamber, maybe 30 feet across. The ceiling was vaulted, and in the center of the room was something that looked like a surgical table. An old surgical table with leather restraints and stains. On the wall behind the table, painted in that same fading white paint, treatment room. Authorized personnel only. I heard breathing, not mine. Someone else was in the room. I spun around, flashlight sweeping the chamber. They were standing along the walls, 30, 40, maybe 50 of them, men and women, old and young, all wearing those ancient hospital gowns, all barefoot, all watching me. "Are you here to let us out?" one of them asked. "Please," said another. "We've been waiting so long." "I can't," I said. My voice was shaking. "I can't let you out. I don't even know how to get out myself." The closest figure stepped forward. A man. Maybe 40 years old, with deep lines in his face and empty eyes. "Then you'll wait with us," he said. They moved toward me. Not fast, not running, just walking. Closing in from all sides. I looked around frantically. There had to be another exit, another tunnel, something. There. On the far side of the chamber, a door, metal, modern, with a push bar, an emergency exit. I ran for it, shoved through the crowd of figures. They felt like cobwebs, insubstantial, but cold. So cold. I hit the push bar and the door flew open. Stairs going up. I took them 3 at a time. My lungs were burning and my legs felt like jelly, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The stairs ended at another door. This one was labeled Psychiatric Building, Basement Level, Access Restricted. I pushed through, and I was in the modern hospital. Fluorescent lights, clean floors, a hallway with signs pointing to the pharmacy and the imaging department. I was back. I collapsed against the wall and checked my phone. 12:32 a.m. I'd been down there for 40 minutes. I radioed to my supervisor, told him I'd fixed the chiller and was heading back to the break room. I didn't tell him about Section D. I didn't tell anyone. Not until 2 weeks later when I was training a new guy and he asked about the basement. "Any place I should avoid?" he asked. I looked at him. Young guy, eager, didn't know what he was getting into. "Yeah," I said. "Never go into the sub-basement alone after midnight." "Why not?" I thought about the woman in the tunnel, the room full of shadows, the words carved into the stone. "Let me out. Let me out. Let me out." "Because the exits down there don't always work," I said. "And the people who got stuck there, they're still looking for a way out." He laughed. Thought I was messing with him. I let him think that. But I know the truth. Mass General's a good hospital, state-of-the-art, best in the country, above ground. But underneath, in the sub-basement where the old hospital still exists, there are patients who never got discharged, and they're waiting for someone to let them out. I just hope nobody ever does. I'm a transit worker for the MTA. I've been riding the rails for 16 years. I know every station, every tunnel, every service entrance from Coney Island to the Bronx. What I'm about to tell you shouldn't exist on any map, but I have the transfer card to prove I was there. My name is Marcus Webb, and I work overnight maintenance on the A and C lines. It's a good gig if you don't mind the hours and the rats and the occasional track fire. You get to see the subway when it's empty, when it's just you and the trains and the city sleeping overhead. January 15th, 2024. I was doing a routine track inspection at Canal Street around 2:30 in the morning. The station was closed for the night, just me and my partner Deshaun checking signal lights and clearing debris from the rails. That's when I saw it. A service door I'd never noticed before. I'd walked past this same spot probably 500 times. 500 times in 16 years. But I'd never seen this door. It was metal, old, the kind of riveted steel they used back in the 1920s when they were building the original subway lines. No handle on the outside, just a smooth surface with a faded number painted in yellow. 73. "You ever seen this door?" I asked Deshaun. He looked up from his clipboard. "What door?" "This one, right here." Deshaun walked over and stared at the wall. "Man, there's no door there." "What are you talking about? It's right." I put my hand on the metal surface. Cold, solid, real. "You seriously don't see this?" He looked at me like I was losing it. "Marcus, that's just wall. Same as it's always been." But I could see the door. I could feel it. I could read the number. 73. "I'm going to check it out," I said. "Check out what?" I didn't answer. I was already looking for a way to open it. The door had no handle, but there was a small indentation near the bottom, like a release catch. I pressed it. The door swung inward with a metallic groan. "Marcus, where are you going?" Deshaun sounded confused, worried. I stepped through the doorway, and I was in a tunnel. Not the Canal Street station, not the maintenance tunnel I'd just been standing in. This was different. Older. The walls were covered in white tile, the kind they used in the earliest subway stations. The tiles were cracked and water-stained, and the air smelled like wet stone and rust. Behind me, I could hear Deshaun calling my name, but his voice sounded distant, muffled, like he was shouting from the other side of a thick wall. I turned around to go back. The door was gone. Just smooth tile wall. No door, no opening, no way out. "Deshaun!" I pounded on the wall. "Deshaun, can you hear me?" Nothing. I pulled out my radio. "Deshaun, this is Marcus. I I don't know where I am. I went through a door, and now I'm in some kind of old tunnel. Can you hear me? Static. I tried my phone. No signal. Of course not. We were underground. Even the tunnel access points only got 1 or 2 bars on a good day. I was alone. I turned around and looked down the tunnel. It sloped downward, taking me deeper into the system, deeper than the normal subway tunnels. The floor was concrete, cracked and uneven, and the ceiling was low enough that I had to duck under the occasional support beam. There were lights, old incandescent bulbs in wire cages, spaced about every 30 feet. Most of them were working. That was the weird part. Someone was maintaining the lights down here. But who? I walked forward. My work boots echoed on the concrete, and I could hear water dripping somewhere in the darkness ahead. The tunnel opened into a platform, a subway platform, but not one I recognized. The platform was tiled in white and green, a color scheme they stopped using in the 1940s. There were wooden benches along the wall and old-style advertising posters in frames. I walked closer to read one. Visit Coney Island, America's playground. The poster showed women in old-fashioned bathing suits and men in straw hats. The date at the bottom said, 1928. I looked down the platform. There were more posters, more benches, and at the far end, a sign. Worth Street. I'd heard of Worth Street Station. Every transit worker had. It was one of the original IRT stations, opened in 1904, closed in 1962, abandoned, sealed off. Nobody had been in Worth Street for over 60 years, except the lights were on. The platform was clean. And on one of the benches, someone had left a newspaper. I picked it up. The New York Times, February 3rd, 1962. The day Worth Street closed. The paper was yellowed but intact, like it had been sitting there for 62 years, but somehow hadn't rotted, hadn't been touched by rats or water damage or time. I heard a sound, distant but getting closer, a rumble, a vibration in the rails. A train was coming. I looked down at the tracks. They were old, the original rails from the 1900s, but they were shiny, polished, like they'd been used recently. The rumble grew louder. I stepped back from the platform edge and watched as a train pulled into the station. An old train, not the modern R trains we run today. This was an ancient subway car, maybe from the 1930s. Steel exterior, rounded roof, small windows, the kind of train my grandfather might have ridden. The train stopped and the doors opened. Nobody got off. I looked inside. The car was empty. Wooden bench seats, hanging straps, old light fixtures, and a sign above the conductor's booth. Next stop, City Hall. City Hall Station. Another ghost station, closed in 1945. One of the most famous abandoned stations in the entire system. Beautiful architecture, tiled arches, skylights. Rumor had it they still turned the trains around there, that the loop at City Hall was still in use. But nobody had actually seen it in decades. I should have stayed on the platform, should have waited for help. But I needed to understand what was happening, where I was, how to get back. I stepped onto the train. The doors closed immediately. The train started moving. I grabbed one of the hanging straps and looked out the window. The tunnel walls slid past, covered in old graffiti and water stains. We picked up speed, the wheels screeching on the ancient rails. The car swayed and rocked. The lights flickered. And then I noticed something. There were other passengers on the train, not in my car. But through the windows between the cars, I could see people sitting, standing, reading newspapers, dressed like it was 1962. The train slowed and pulled into another station, City Hall. The doors opened. I stepped out onto the platform and just stopped. Because City Hall Station was beautiful, even abandoned, even forgotten. It was gorgeous. The platform curved in a gentle arc, following the turn of the tracks. The walls were covered in elaborate tile work, green and cream and terracotta arranged in arched patterns. The ceiling was vaulted, with skylights that once let in natural light from the street above. Now those skylights were dark, but the old chandeliers were still lit, casting a warm amber glow across the empty platform. I'd seen photos of City Hall Station online, historic preservation sites, urban exploration forums, but seeing it in person was different. It felt alive. I walked along the platform and noticed the details: brass fixtures, hand-painted tile, decorative ironwork. This wasn't just a subway station. It was art, a piece of the city's history preserved in abandoned darkness. At the far end of the platform, there was another sign: Transfer to Worth Street Line. I followed the sign through an archway and found myself in another tunnel. This one was different, wider, with tiled walls and a series of metal gates blocking side passages. The gates were locked, but through the bars I could see more platforms, more stations, abandoned stations, stations that had never appeared on any map, and on each platform, people, dozens of them, waiting. They stood in small groups or sat on benches, all dressed in clothes from different eras: 1920s, 1950s, 1980s. Some of them looked normal, just people waiting for a train. Others looked wrong, translucent, faded, like old photographs slowly losing their color. One of them noticed me, a woman, maybe 30 years old, wearing a dress and coat from the 1940s. She walked up to the gate and wrapped her fingers around the bars. "Excuse me," she said. "Do you know when the next train is coming?" I don't work this line," I said, "but you work for the MTA." She gestured at my uniform. "You must know the schedule." "There is no schedule. This station is closed." She looked confused. "Closed? But I just got here. I transferred from the Lexington Avenue line. I'm trying to get to Brooklyn." "When did you transfer?" "About 10 minutes ago, maybe less. The man at the token booth said to wait here for the Brooklyn train." "What year is it?" I asked. She laughed. "What kind of question is that? It's 1943. "It's 2024, I said. She stopped laughing. "That's not possible," she whispered. But she was starting to fade. I could see through her now, through her dress, through her hands still gripping the bars. "I was just going home," she said. "I work at the Navy Yard, third shift. I was just going home." Then she was gone. I backed away from the gate and heard more voices, coming from the other platforms, the other stations, all of them asking the same question: when is the next train coming? I ran, back through the tunnel, back to City Hall Station. The train was still there, doors open, waiting. I jumped on and the doors closed. The train started moving immediately, picking up speed as it entered the tunnel. But we weren't going back to Worth Street. We were going deeper. The tunnel descended at a steep angle, and the train swayed dangerously on the old tracks. I grabbed a pole and held on as we plunged into darkness. The lights in the car flickered and went out. When they came back on, there were other passengers in my car. A man in a conductor's uniform from the 1930s, a woman with two small children, a businessman reading a newspaper from 1956. They all looked at me. "This is your stop," the conductor said. The train screeched to a halt. The doors opened. We were in another station. But this one was different, newer. The walls were concrete instead of tile. The platform was narrow and dimly lit, and the sign said, Canal Street. My station. I stepped off the train and turned around to see where I'd come from. It was just a maintenance tunnel. Normal. Modern. The same tunnel I'd been inspecting hours ago. Deshaun was there, standing about 20 feet away, checking his clipboard. "Deshaun," he looked up. "Marcus, where the hell have you been? I've been looking for you for 5 minutes." 5 minutes? I've been gone for at least an hour. "Dude, you walked around that corner like 90 seconds ago. I called after you and you didn't answer. You okay?" I looked at my watch. 2:36 a.m. I'd left at 2:32, 4 minutes. I'd been gone for 4 minutes, but I'd seen Worth Street, City Hall, the abandoned platforms, the people who'd been waiting for trains that would never come. I reached into my pocket and pulled out what I'd taken from the bench at Worth Street. The newspaper. February 3rd, 1962. It crumbled to dust in my hands. I didn't tell Deshawn what happened. I finished my shift, went home, tried to sleep, but I kept thinking about that woman in the 1940s dress, the one who was just trying to get home to Brooklyn. I looked her up, spent hours going through old missing persons reports from 1943, and I found her. Helen Kowalski, age 29, employed at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, last seen leaving work on the night of November 18th, 1943. Never arrived home, case unsolved. I found others too, dozens of them, hundreds maybe. People who'd entered the subway and never come out, people who'd transferred to the wrong train, people who'd gotten off at the wrong station, people who were still waiting, still trying to find their way home. I don't work the night shift anymore. I requested a transfer to day maintenance, told my supervisor I needed better hours for my health. But the reason I can't say out loud, is that I'm afraid I'll see that door again. Door number 73. And I'm afraid that next time, I won't be able to find my way back. The third time I saw it, I knew it wasn't coincidence, but by then, it was already too late to leave. My name is Aisha Martinez, and I'm a night supervisor for New York City Transit. I manage the overnight crews that keep the subway running while the city sleeps. It's my job to know every inch of track, every signal, every train in the system. But there's one train I can't explain. They call it the ghost train. Every transit worker has heard the stories. A train that appears on the tracks late at night. A train that doesn't appear on any schedule. A train that picks up passengers who never get off. I thought it was bullshit, urban legend, the kind of story old-timers tell to scare new hires. Until March 27th, 2024. I was in the control center at J Street monitoring the overnight trains. We had 4 trains running on the A line, 3 on the C, and 2 making local stops on the E. All of them showing up on the tracking system exactly where they should be. Except there was a 5th signal on the A line, a train that shouldn't exist. I zoomed in on the tracking map. The signal was moving southbound between West 4th Street and Spring Street, but according to the schedule, all our A trains were either at the Rockaways or up in Inwood. None of them were supposed to be in Lower Manhattan. I radioed the control tower at West 4th. This is Martinez at J Street. Do you have visual on an unscheduled southbound A train? Static. Then, negative J Street, all scheduled trains accounted for. I'm showing a signal between your position and Spring Street. Can you confirm? Pause. J Street. There's nothing here, just empty track. But the signal was moving, heading south, picking up speed. I switched to the Spring Street camera feed. Empty platform, 2:37 a.m. No passengers waiting, just the usual overnight cleaning crew and a couple of security officers. The signal on my screen was approaching Spring Street. I watched the camera feed. Nothing. The signal passed through Spring Street Station. The camera showed empty track. This doesn't make sense, I muttered. My colleague James leaned over to look at my screen. What's the problem? I'm tracking a ghost. Probably a glitch. System's been acting up all week. Yeah, probably. But I watched that signal for the next 20 minutes as it moved through the system. Canal Street, Chambers Street, Fulton Street, never stopping, never slowing, just running the same route over and over. At 3:15 a.m., I got a call from the transit police. Martinez, we've got a situation at Chambers Street. Multiple passengers reporting a train that, well, this sounds crazy. A train that they can see but can't board. What do you mean they can't board it? They mean the doors won't open. Train pulls into the station, sits there for maybe 30 seconds, then takes off again. But nobody gets on or off. And when people try to look in the windows, they say the train looks empty. Is it one of ours? That's the thing. It's not on the schedule. But it's definitely an A train. Old model, like really old. One of the passengers said it looked like a train from the 70s. I checked my tracking screen. The unscheduled signal was at Chambers Street. I'm coming down there, I said. I took a company car and drove to Chambers Street Station. Got there at 3:45 a.m. The platform had maybe a dozen people scattered around. Late-night workers, insomniacs, people with nowhere else to go. I showed my ID to the station agent and went through to the southbound platform. "You hear about the weird train?" the agent asked. "Yeah. Has it come through again?" "Every 20 minutes like clockwork. Pulls in, sits for 30 seconds, leaves, no passengers, no conductor visible, just runs." "Next one should be here in about 6 minutes," I said, checking my phone. We waited. At 3:51 a.m., I felt it. The vibration in the platform, the rumble of an approaching train. The headlights appeared in the tunnel. The train pulled into the station and I saw it clearly. It was an old R train, the kind they retired back in 2003. Steel body, graffiti-covered exterior, small windows. The train stopped. The doors didn't open. I walked up to one of the windows and looked inside. Empty. No passengers, no conductor. Just rows of orange plastic seats and flickering fluorescent lights. But there was something on one of the seats. A backpack, and on another seat, a purse, and on the floor, a shoe. Like people had been there recently. Like they'd left their things behind and just disappeared. I tried the door, pulled on it. It didn't budge. The train sat there for exactly 30 seconds. Then it started moving. I stepped back as it pulled out of the station and disappeared into the tunnel. "What the hell was that?" the station agent asked. "I don't know," I said. But I had an idea. I went back to the control center and pulled up the historical tracking data, searched for anomalies, unscheduled trains, signals that appeared and disappeared. I found dozens of them, going back years, the same pattern. A train appears on the tracking system, runs the same route, never stops, never opens its doors, shows up once a week, sometimes more. And every time it appeared, within 24 hours, someone went missing. A passenger who entered the subway and never came out. I cross-referenced the missing persons reports with the appearance of the ghost train. The correlation was perfect. March 20th. Train appears. March 21st. College student goes missing after boarding the A train at West 4th Street. February 8th. Train appears. February 9th. Tourist vanishes after taking the subway from Times Square. January 3rd. Train appears. January 4th. Night shift worker disappears between 125th Street and 59th Street. The pattern went back 5 years, hundreds of disappearances, all connected to the ghost train. I was still researching when my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. Martinez. Static. Then a voice, distant, echoing. "Help us." "Who is this?" "We can't get off. The doors won't open. We've been riding for, I don't know how long. Days, weeks. Please, we just want to get home." The line went dead. I checked the tracking system. The ghost train was running again, heading north on the A line, approaching my station, J Street. I looked at the time, 4:17 a.m. I had maybe 3 minutes before it arrived. I should have stayed in the control center, should have called for backup, but I needed to see it again, needed to understand. I went down to the platform. J Street was empty at this hour, just me and the fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of trains in other tunnels. I could feel it before I saw it. The vibration, the change in air pressure. The ghost train was coming. I stood at the edge of the platform and watched it emerge from the tunnel. It looked different this time, older, more damaged. The graffiti was deeper. The steel was rusted. The windows were cracked. It pulled into the station and stopped directly in front of me. This time, the doors opened. I looked inside. The train was full. Dozens of people, maybe 100, packed into the car like it was rush hour, all of them standing, all of them facing the doors, facing me. They all looked the same, tired, confused, lost. And they were all dressed in different styles from different years. Someone in a 1980s tracksuit, someone in a 2000s hip-hop outfit, someone in work clothes from last year. All of them missing, all of them trapped. A young woman at the front of the crowd stepped toward the open door. "Please," she said, "can you help us get off?" She tried to step through the doorway, but she couldn't. It was like there was an invisible barrier. She pressed her hands against it, her face contorting with effort, but she couldn't pass through. "I've been trying for 3 weeks," she said. "I got on at 59th Street. I was just going home, but the train didn't stop. It just kept going. And now I can't get off." Behind her, the other passengers were nodding. Some of them were crying. Some of them just stared with empty eyes. "How do I help you?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "Nobody knows. We just ride. Forever." The doors started to close. "Wait!" I reached out to stop them. My hand went through the doorway, through the barrier that kept them trapped, and I felt something grab my wrist. The young woman. Her fingers were cold, solid. "Don't get on," she said. "Whatever you do, don't get on." The doors closed. The train started moving. I stepped back and watched it pull out of the station. On the window, someone had written something in the condensation. "Help us." The train disappeared into the tunnel. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty track. Then I went back to the control center and wrote a report, documented everything, the tracking anomalies, the missing persons correlation, the ghost train. I submitted it to my supervisor. He called me into his office the next day. "Aisha, I need you to take some time off." "What? Why?" "This report, it's concerning. You're talking about ghost trains and trapped passengers. You need rest." "But it's all documented. The tracking data. The tracking data shows a software glitch. We've had the system analyzed. It's just a bug. Happens sometimes with the old infrastructure." "And the missing persons? People go missing in New York every day. It's a coincidence." "It's not a coincidence." He looked at me with pity. "Take 2 weeks. Paid leave. When you come back, we'll talk about reassignment." I took the leave, but I didn't stop investigating. I went to the stations where people had disappeared, talked to witnesses, checked security footage, and I found something. In every case, right before someone went missing, the ghost train had passed through the station, and in every case, the person who disappeared had been standing too close to the platform edge, not on the platform, on the edge, like they were considering getting on. I thought about the young woman's words. Don't get on. Whatever you do, don't get on. I went back to J Street Station. 4 a.m. The ghost train was scheduled to appear in 6 minutes. I stood at the platform edge and waited. The train arrived. The doors opened. The passengers stared at me with desperate eyes. "Please," they said, "please help us." I took one step closer. The train was vibrating, humming, like it was alive, like it was hungry. I could feel it pulling at me, calling to me, promising a journey that would never end. I took another step. My foot was on the threshold, and then I heard a voice behind me. "Ma'am? Ma'am, you okay?" I turned around. A transit cop, young guy, concerned expression. "I'm fine," I said. I looked back at the train. The doors were closing. The passengers were still there, still trapped, still begging for help. The train pulled away and vanished into the darkness. "You were standing pretty close to the edge there," the cop said, "just making sure you're all right." "Yeah," I said, "I'm all right." But I wasn't. Because I'd almost gotten on. I'd almost joined them. And if that cop hadn't shown up, if he hadn't pulled me back from the edge, I'd be riding that train right now, forever. I quit the MTA 2 weeks later, told them I was taking a job in the private sector. Better hours, better pay. That was partly true, but mostly I just couldn't work in the subway anymore. Couldn't stand on the platforms. Couldn't watch the trains come and go. Because now I know the truth. The subway doesn't just move people from one place to another. Sometimes it keeps them. And the ghost train is still running. Every week, every month, every year. Picking up passengers who stand too close to the edge. Passengers who never get off. If you ride the subway late at night, if you're waiting on an empty platform and you see an old train pull in, a train that doesn't look quite right, don't get on, no matter how tired you are, no matter how badly you want to get home. Don't get on, because the doors might close behind you, and you might never get off.